Hello and welcome to Self Smarter. It's me, Megan, and today we're mixing it up a little bit by reintroducing a wonderful episode that we launched early on in our podcast journey. Why are we doing that? Well, we believe that this topic is still extremely relevant, and it's called The Damn Truth About Work-Life Balance. As much as I wish the worry about work-life balance would just disappear and go away, I'm afraid the feeling is here to stay. And this is just a truth we really should get our arms around as professionals and maybe reframe the whole notion for ourselves. As a producer of this podcast, I keep an eye on things that other leaders are talking about, worried about, having to navigate on a daily basis so that we can elevate that for you here on the podcast. And guess what? Work-life balance is still up there in the conversations taking place. And I think the reason is because millennials and Gen Zs are really starting to become parents or are really getting into their careers. And while navigating higher prices and needing good jobs, reliable jobs, this just continues to burden us. So what if we let the burden go by framing our minds differently around the notion of work-life balance? That's really what we talk about in this episode of Self Smarter, so that's why we wanted to reintroduce it to you today. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for joining us. Happy Independence Day, and welcome to the damn truth about work-life balance.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome, Self Smarter listeners. I'm Megan, and this is my trusty co-host, Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to dive into a heaping helping of bull.
Of bull?
Yep, you said bull, and so we're going to dive into that. In fact, I have to tell the story. Last weekend, we enjoyed some time with our industry colleagues and saw everyone at a trade show. And you were invited to speak on a panel.
I was very, very honored to be a part of it.
Yes, and it was a women's event.
It was.
And at some point during the event, you were asked a question and you answered in a funny way. Okay, I did not know that. Okay, I did not know that. So I'm setting the stage for our listeners.
I don't know if it was funny.
I didn't go. I didn't get to go. The business needed me and that needed you. And so that's what we did. We divided and conquered. But then the next day, I go to the event and I met a lot of new women on the show floor. And I would just casually ask them, you know, did you go to the event yesterday, the women's event? And of course, 6 out of 6 said, yes, it was awesome.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Like, yeah. And I was like, wonderful. Was there any one speaker that stood out to you?
You're checking up. You're literally checking up on me.
I mean, kind of. Because I know you. And I know that sometimes things come out of your mouth on stages that are a bit shocking, but true.
Okay, fair.
Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay. Well, when I would ask people, I would say, was there any one speaker? And they'd say yes. And I would say, well, what was her name? And they were like, well, I can't remember her name exactly because I think it was different, which I automatically knew at that point it's you.
Yes, different name for sure.
Different name. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like Sally or
Megan.
Joan.
Or Megan.
Or Megan. It's DAN', Danelle, right? So people have talked. We were used to that.
We are welcome to my world.
Danielle, like you're called all kinds of things, but it's just good old fashioned Danelle. Anyway, I would say, okay, and what did this person say that really made them stand out to you? Mm-hmm. And they said, well, she said work-life balance is bullshit.
Yes, I did.
6 out of 6 remembered that line, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
Inspired by your candor at this event, because it did affect people's lives since then. And we can talk about that later. I'll pepper that in. But I know for sure the 6 out of 6 women that I spoke to who did not know you before, definitely know you now. And it was the way you described work-life balance being bullshit that we're really going to talk about today.
Yeah, we are. And I mean, I guess thank you for checking up on me. I don't blame you, because it's probably the right thing to do for our business, and to prepare yourself to walk a show floor where you weren't at that particular session, right. And so that you could understand. But I was stopped a lot. And so I know that this topic, and that's why we're going to talk about the damn truth about work-life balance, because I think me sharing some wisdom that I had garnered through the years about this particular topic, it's, we've been fed a lot. And I think if we can just simply change our mindset about it, we can be freed to feel less frustration, totally. Less shame, less guilt around comparing our life to work. Like, that's really what I want to talk about today. And again, I had a couple of minutes on that stage, but even with those couple of minutes, I could tell by what people were saying to me, and then obviously to you. And I know that it was brought up to others in our organization as well, is that this is something that, in this instance, women, but I know men too, struggle with this notion of balance. So we thought it would be great to really talk about this today in terms of, this is not necessarily a structured topic.
Right.
This is really largely centered around my opinion and then our experiences. But what we're hopeful is that our listeners can find some, I don't know, relief or inspiration by us sharing what we've learned around this topic that, again, we've been, I don't know what the right word is, but I think the right word is almost fed.
Yes.
And so that's what today's about. I'm excited.
Me too. I really am.
And I love to be able to, throw down a bullshit every once in a while.
Just for the hell of it.
The hell of it.
Well, what I love about it is you're speaking truthfully.
Yes.
And people know that. Mm-hmm. And that is why they're drawn to it. Mm-hmm. And to your point, when you strike a nerve, you struck a nerve when you said work-life balance is bullshit. I don't think the panel moderator or anyone else on the panel was expecting you to say that. But henceforth, that is why we're here today, is because you did strike a nerve, and we knew we needed to talk about it.
Yes.
Did you know that 53% of all website traffic comes from organic search, but nearly 91% of pages get no organic search traffic from Google? You can be part of the 10% of websites that do succeed at being found organically through search engine optimization, or SEO. Right now, we're offering free SEO assessments that will determine how well your current website is optimized and tell you what you need to address if you'd like to gain a higher Google search ranking. You'll learn your overall SEO score, the high priority, medium priority, and low priority problems holding you back. And you'll gain insights into how your competitors are ranking in comparison. Ooh la la. Businesses that invest in SEO see increased website traffic that results in more lead generation and ultimately, guys, sales. If this sounds like something you'd like to see for your website, reach out to us here at the DMA Solutions team at info@dma-solutions.com and request your free SEO assessment today. So let's talk about work-life balance. Why do you think it's bullshit?
I mean, the notion sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the history in just a second, but I love the notion of balance. I mean, who doesn't want balance? And I mean that again, but at the same time, it's one of those things that, is that attainable? And why are we comparing our work and our life? I can't help it, but this visual pops up of a scale.
Right.
And I think we all know the proverbial scale.
Yes.
And where we're in balance, that thing never really does balance out. And so I really struggled with that notion, because I felt like I was constant from the beginning of my career in a constant pursuit of this thing, where it was a destination that I was headed to. Like, once I obtained it, it was going to stick. And I quickly, thankfully for me and my sanity, started to realize that. And I know you're going to lead us into that, but I think that it's, again, it sounds great.
Yes.
But the reality of it is to me a farce.
It is. And there's, you and I are both ex-Jenners. We make no bones about that. But the importance of us being ex-Jenners is that we're definitely in between baby boomers, which work-life balance wasn't even a thought. They were just like, do it. Like, this is what I have to do. Right.
Right.
And women entering the workforce and in large rates. And then you've got the millennials. So we're flanked by who are all about it. What they think
work-life balance is.
Work-life balance is. And so we're right smack dab in the middle of that, trying to go, wait, if we're going to pave a path for these women who are the millennials and younger, we owe it to them to speak the truth.
Right.
And so magazines for years in our 20s, early 30s, right when we were starting families and having children and all that jazz, were telling us that we had to believe in this.
Yes.
Has there been anything that, because I think we all were impacted by all of that time. Like you said, we were chatting about this earlier. You're like, yeah, like Time Magazine and New York Times and all the biggies that you're supposed to trust were telling me to do this.
Yeah. I mean, the topic was very prevalent. And so if you think about us entering the workforce, I know I entered it in the mid 90s. I think you came in at late 90s or early 2000s. And we'll talk again, I'll reference the history in a second because I did research. I've never researched the topic actually until we decided to do this episode because I wanted to know, when was this born and where did this concept come from? But it was something that was being talked about. So it was a pressure that I was putting on myself, and especially, you know, coming out of college into this incredible career that I was on the fast track in many ways, and the company was growing, and I was working a lot, and work was an important part of my life, but I didn't feel like it was taking away from my life. But when I would read these articles, I felt like I almost had to separate things. But I enjoy working. And then when I really started to realize that I did not agree with the concept in full was when I became a young mother. So that was about 7 years into my career, 6 or 7 years into my career, when I got pregnant with Mackie Payton. And now I'm a working mom. And it really I started to realize, because a lot of the times when you would read these articles, it was either speaking to the person or it was speaking about what the company should be doing to ensure that employees had work-life balance. And I kept thinking to myself, how is a company going to create balance for me? And then I started to realize, wait a minute, I'm in control of my quote unquote balance. And I started to get very sensible about it. And I was almost forced to, because I loved my work. Right. I also loved my family, and I loved my baby, and I loved all the other aspects of my life too. And I did not want to, feel as though I had to sacrifice those things. And I sure as hell didn't want to become bitter at my job, my employer, the company that I love so much, when they couldn't control the decisions I made. They can't manage that for me. And so I got really, really smart about it. And I started to realize, and obviously this wasn't coined at the time, but as I've really started to pay more attention to balance, as I'm coaching this team around here on this subject a lot, I like, and I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Jeff Bezos, but I love what he said. He was talking to Thrive Global, and he said, I think work-life harmony is a better framework. And he says, I prefer the word harmony to the word balance, because balance tends to imply a strict trade-off.
Right.
And that was the wording that I needed, because that was where I was having a conflict with this balance, was that it was a trade-off. I had my work and then I have my life.
That's right.
Wait a minute. No, work is a very important part
of your life,
of my life, but it's not in conflict with my life.
No, it's an intersection.
Unless I allow it to be. And we can talk through that a little bit more, but I like the idea of harmony. And I think that is something that we should be exploring more as we look at our work and how it relates to our life.
So then today we're really going to be reframing that work-life balance into a different concept, more harmonious.
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about you a little bit more, and what you know for sure as a leader of a business, and how work-life balance is, quite frankly, how we're doing it here.
Yeah. So one of the things that I spoke to on the panel, and I definitely talk a lot about it whether I'm coaching this team, and or the folks that I'm in conversation with, whether it's someone, a colleague of mine, and or someone I'm mentoring, is that one of the things that in this journey that I've been on is that I started to realize that if balance isn't a destination, it's not something you get to and obtain. So what I started to do is really think about the week I had ahead, or the month in so many cases for me. And, because I could look at the calendar and go, wow, I have 3 trips in the month of the month of June. Okay, what does that mean for the things that are important to me? What does that mean from a family perspective? What does that mean from a work perspective? What does that mean? And sometimes the travel was personal and sometimes it was work. So I had to think about those things. And I would also do it on, I'd take an hour or 30 minutes on an early Monday morning or a Sunday, and I would just look at my week, and I would know ahead of time, I'm going to show up with these roles, because we all have roles, multiple roles. And sometimes we have multiple roles within a company, when we have multiple roles within our family and, with our friend group. And then we have our own role relative to ourselves. So we got to take care of our health, and we have to do certain, all these things. And when you think about it, we're never going to completely be in balance on any given week, but you can still reframe it and go, you know what, this week I'm not going to be able to go to dinner with my girlfriends. Right. I'm going to have to miss this go around, but I can absolutely connect with them and say, hey,
or can you guys push it to next week?
Or, for me, I could never do that because I was traveling so much and it was just easier for them to get together. But for me, I could still communicate and say, hey, going to miss you guys, but I'll catch you next time. Here are my open dates. And so, and again, I think you can fill in, I can't say for everyone what all the roles that any one person has, but when I gave myself the grace, I gave myself the grace knowing there were going to be weeks where I was going to be the best CEO. Mm-hmm. And then there were going to be weeks where I was going to be the ideal mom. Mm. And, because I was either present or I was going to be able to do certain things with her. And again, there were weeks when I was ideal, both CEO and mom. It just, but if I were to say to myself, it had to be a certain way all the time, I was going to be in a perpetual state of disappointment.
Right.
And then with disappointment, then comes the shame, then comes the guilt. Again, we can get out Brené's atlas of the heart and we can really start to unpack those emotions. But once I did not allow a concept to rule my thinking around balance, and once I didn't expect a company to deliver that for me, I was free to create the harmony that I was looking for. Was it always harmonious? Hell no.
No, you have to figure it out.
But if I could prepare for it, most of the time I could find it. Better. Yeah. And then when the curveballs came, they came. And, then I dealt with them, or I struggled through them, or whatever it may have been. But I think, again, just changing the mindset around the concept that had been teed up almost as this, if you don't have this, you're not well. Yeah. You should expect this and you should demand this. No.
That's work at this.
That to me is where the bull came in. Yeah. And I just started to dismiss it and not allow that notion to guide me.
You really got your arms around it for our business, because we have men and women that work here, mostly women. Mm-hmm. Mostly women under the age of 50. We have one woman that's over the age of 50. But most women are in their 40s, 30s, and then 20s. Mm-hmm. So everybody's in a different stage of life. But you really got your arms around this. You presented a presentation to us in January of 2021 that really framed this out beautifully for us, because people don't realize, yes, they believe they want to achieve work-life balance. I understand that they want to do that. But how the business is going to support you in that is a big question mark probably for everybody listening to this. So talk to us about how you framed that for the business in January of 2021 relative to your role, our role as leaders in a business and helping folks.
Well, one of the things that I knew I wanted for this business as we were preparing for this 5-year plan, really, and again, if you've been listening to the podcast, the 8-year journey that we used to strengthen my ability as a leader and thus all the other leaders at this company. And then to really work on our culture and to get our culture to a healthy spot and then prepare our business for the continued growth. Again, we've been successful, but we're expanding our business. And so in preparation for that, I really started to think about, and then also the transition of you becoming, running the day to day. And as I accepted a new role as founder and CEO, I really started to think about how I wanted this business to show up for people. Mm-hmm. And instead of the scale. Yeah, it's this scale that is representative of work-life balance that we see so often. Is I see work as being like if your life is here in the middle, I see work as being like this foundational thing. If you choose to work, whether it's part-time, full-time, or whatever it may be, work should be a foundational support to your life. You should work in an environment, I would hope that you can, to where that work supports your health and wellness, supports your family, supports your desires to travel, puts you in a position to be a better, whatever your roles are, daughter, son, friend, again, the many roles that we have, and I think they're different for everyone, or whatever what you're interested in. I would hope that your work would empower you to be able to live your life in a healthier way. And so I started to look at all of our benefits and our perks and how we show up as an organization so that I can not only share with the folks here that you're in control of your balance, because I knew for sure as a business owner, I couldn't create benefits or perks that catered to you, right, mid-40s, teenage son, right, and then someone who's 25 who may or may not be dating, right, at the beginning of their career. Totally different. And, and then we have everything in between, from young married couples to people who are preparing to have their first baby. And me, I'm on the other end of the spectrum where my daughter's graduating college, and you're all unique at this company. And I knew as a business owner, I couldn't just say, here, I'm going to go try to create balance for all of you. So I knew that instinctively as an individual. Again, like I've shared early on in my career, I think I found it, at least partly 5 or 6 years into my career. So I would consider that early on. But then as a business owner, the last 18 years, I realized, and it took me a while, because I wanted there to be fairness, and I wanted there to be this everything works for everyone. That's right. And the reality is it doesn't. But what I could do is that I could create an aggressive benefits package and perks, and offer perks that support people who are responsible enough to think about their life and work being an important part of it, and realize that, wait a minute, I control the decisions I make, and this business is here to support me in my journey of life. That also includes the work. And so that's part of the coaching that I provide here, is that you're in control, but here are all the things that we're offering you, mm-hmm, in order to support all the aspects of your life. And that, we announced last year we're paying 100% of healthcare. The reason why I decided to do that is because I want people to know at this company that I care deeply, and that we were at a position financially where we could afford it for the first time. And it means a lot to me. Mm-hmm. Now, that probably didn't resonate with everyone right away, but when I think about the majority of it, it did. And now I watch people now coming off of their parents' insurance, and then we share the dollar amount that they would have been paying. Like, here's what we're paying on a monthly basis for your insurance. They're able to connect that benefit to seeing what a big impact it is to them, financially, but also they know that this company cares. Right. And so if you're a listener and you're working somewhere where you're feeling like the business is pulling away from certain aspects of your life, well, that's a different, probably a conversation to be had in a one-on-one type situation. But what I would say is, I do hope that businesses are doing things that are in support of people's life, and then that the people listening realize you're still in control. Yeah. Maybe you don't have again, I don't know what it takes to create balance in your world, but for some people, it just depends on what it is. But I do know that when you can think about you're in control, what do I have? What barriers do I have that are blocking me from this harmony that I am looking for? Most of the time, the answer is something that you control. And that's what I'm attempting to say here.
Right.
I want people to feel empowered to own the balance and or harmony in their lives. Because once you get across that, then you can address potentially opportunities where you work. And some of you are leaders, so you can make those changes. And or some of you are in a position to influence decisions at your company. And or maybe some of you are not at a company where the business cares too much about you outside of the workplace. And I know that's some of your truths. And that's right. Again, that begs a different discussion.
But still, you said it.
Yep.
You are in the driver's seat.
You are to decide.
Make decisions that are going to make your version of work-life harmony work for you. That's not the job of the business. The business obviously is a business and has a job to fulfill, and you are a part of that business. So you get to decide your fate in that instance. So I'm actually putting together right now as I'm listening to you and appreciating everything you have to say, especially from, listeners who are leaders, listeners who are business owners, and then on the other side of it, people who are working for businesses who are after this notion and they've heard about it and they potentially are going through this. I think about the pandemic and I think about this sort of bubbling pot simmer that came up to an boiling over in 2020, where people, well, quite frankly, they realized what it felt like to be at home all the time. I think they probably liked it. Personally, I'm too extroverted. Like I was like, get me out of here. But some people liked it. And then as a result of that, we had, which you talk about, the Great Resignation.
Yeah, and I don't talk about it. The reality, we did as a culture, we had the Great Resignation. And I think, and I like how you described that there was already a simmer.
Yes.
And what was simmering is that we had toxic cultures. We had a lot of businesses that weren't showing up with people first in mind.
Yeah.
And I think there were a lot of frustrated individuals out there that were already on the brink.
Yes.
And then you have the pandemic hit, and it was almost this permission slip to make. And I think people made a lot of life decisions during COVID, not just relative to, leaving a workplace, but in this instance, that's what we're speaking to specifically. And what I think ended up happening is that I think those people who were already on the brink and rightly probably should have been leaving those organizations and finding their way other places, it became almost this, I don't think the right word is a cool thing to do, but an acceptable thing to do is to just up and quit. And I think a lot of people who were not prepared financially, were not prepared with a plan that took them beyond those first few months. And, let's be honest, we were in a position from our country was in a position to fund some of this. I'll just leave it at that. So I think people could find justification in that way. But what we're now starting to see, we're at the beginning of, is the Great Resignation, which we've been living through the last 2 years to 18 months, is now turning into what they've coined as the Great Regret.
Yes.
Because there's a larger portion of people who left their jobs. Not all of them were unhappy, but they were in pursuit of this ideal.
Right.
Just same ideal that anyone who bought into the notion that a company is responsible for balance in your life. I don't want a company being in charge of balance in my life. I want to work at a company where they care about it and they're doing things and they're illustrating to me that they care. But I want to be in control of that. So I think that's now what we're starting to see unfold is this great regret. And if you can Google it, you can start to see the conversations really starting to turn. I think Adam Grant I heard a great podcast with him on this particular topic. And we'll put a link to the show notes on that particular podcast because he describes it beautifully. And he describes the psychology behind people making these decisions. And he talks to people who are now in this regretful phase, and many of them have lost everything. And so I think there's these popular topics that get, and now they just get proliferated. And I think, especially when we're in our 20s and our 30s, this idealism that we carry that really is so beautiful. I love it around here. But what I think we're missing is the wisdom and the common sense to help guide those decisions. Now, listen, I could sit down with 10, 25 to 35-year-olds, and they could describe that they want to go pursue XYZ. And I might encourage 7 of the 10 to do just that, especially if they have the potential financial backing to do it, or that they've saved, or whatever it may be. So I think that, yes, I think that now we're living through another version. This one's a little bit different than work-life balance, but what the Great Resignation and work-life balance have in common is their notions that if we don't think through them for ourselves and what is best for us, that we can become bitter really quick, and we can make knee-jerk reactions that put us in my opinion, an even worse situation. So it's just very interesting to see how all of this is, unfolding, and there'll be something else down the road that we're supposed to subscribe to. And I think what I would encourage our listeners, no matter where you are in your journey, because believe me, I've subscribed to a lot of things that didn't serve me well, is to let's make sure that we marinate on these things. And hopefully this podcast can help and be a resource for you. And certainly conversations with people that you trust can help you navigate those times, because again, it fosters, I think, balance. I think, when you're talking to your friends that are working in these ideal scenarios or the opposite, you can really start to feel bad about yourself. And I think social media, we all know, perpetuates the self-doubt, the insecurities. And so I think these utopias that we're being fed we need to be very careful, and we need to use the word, or we need to use our discernment to make sure that we're not seeing we don't have some really thick rose-colored glasses on.
No, for sure. And I mean, I was thinking about this and preparing for this and thinking, okay, Megan, who do you know that it has achieved work-life balance? I mean, honestly, my dearest friends on the planet, there's nurses, there's entrepreneurs, there's teachers, professional people that work for corporations. I mean, you name it. I can't think of one. And that ought to tell you something. I literally could not think of one, but that's based on what I don't even know what that is anymore. Right? So
again, that's why we're calling it out.
Show me someone who's doing it well other than Oprah Winfrey. You know what I mean? Like she's so wealthy and she earned it, and she made a lot of sacrifices along the way.
I don't think I guarantee you, if we ask Oprah, do you have balance? She'd say no. I don't believe in it. Right.
Yeah. Balance is something you achieve in yoga.
Well, I haven't yet, but
talk to me about research. I know you've done some studying in preparation for this, but also over the years and helping our business develop. Talk to us about some of the things you've learned.
Well, one of the things that I learned about the term work-life balance is as we were going through the Industrial Revolution. So if you think about as the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, what was happening during those times is as people were becoming, or businesses were becoming more quote unquote efficient, they started to track hours. And there was this huge revelation. I mean, people working 100 hours a week. And so that led to the realization that, and there was all kinds of health. I mean, there were all these issues that were systemic because of that reality. And this is both in the UK and the US. And then what really started, and when the phrase was coined, work-life balance, was in the 80s, was really relative to the women's liberation movement, that version of the women's liberation movement. As women went into the workplace, they were still expected to have a job and then carry the weight at home, from taking care of the kids to keeping the house to the food, you name it. And so it started to reveal itself really relative to women's liberation in the 80s, which makes sense because then it started to gain traction as being something that businesses should be in better support of, or partners or spouses should be in more support of women in the workplace. Then it manifested, because when I started paying attention to it in the early or the mid 90s, was, then it became something that, scholars and business, or not leaders, but, thought leaders were saying that we should expect, or that we should be in pursuit of. And so I just thought that was interesting, that that's the genesis of where work-life balance comes in, which part of me is like, well, that makes total sense.
Yeah, major problem.
I empathize with that. I wasn't a working woman in the 70s or 80s, but I think about my mom being that way, and the other women in our lives, and I think, wow, that I can see where a desire for more balance came from, and that part makes sense to me, because I don't think there was a lot of potential empowerment for women to make certain decisions about how they go about their day, and how they approach their work, and during the work hours, and the their personal lives. So I do see that today as being something we are much more in control of, which again, that's the part that I want to make sure that people understand, that I'm really trying to drive home with this point, is I want people to feel empowered and not reliant. And that's again, where kind of the history, I get it. I get why it came about, but I also think that it's irrelevant today. And again, there's a lot of reasons, and I know that's one of the things we want to get into is really kind of talking about the myths and the realities.
Right. And really, to your point, anything cultural that involve a cultural change, a cultural shift, takes decades.
Yes.
Hopefully, turns out the social media, explosion culture didn't take that long. But when you think about what you were just talking about, work-life balance and women and the way they are perceived in the home versus in the workplace, that's taken, you were talking about the 40s.
Yeah.
And then it really came around in the 70s. That's 30, 40 years later. And then you didn't enter the workplace until the 90s. I didn't enter it until 99, 2000. And now here we are still talking about that. And that's still a huge issue. Correct. Right? So let's shift. What I'm trying to say is that that part of our culture is moving slowly.
Sure.
And so the revelation that you've had is right on time. And yes, to quote Brandy Carlisle.
I was about to say, did you just quote Brandy?
I did.
Yay.
I threw it in there. But let's talk about, we are going to get into some myths, because this is what people know. Like, the myths are what we've been told.
Right.
But you have sort of a flip the script approach to thinking about these things. So let's dive into those.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm going to put an article in the show notes that I found, a great article. I think it was from entrepreneur.com, where it's like the 10 myths about work-life balance. And I thought the author did a really good job of teeing up these 10 myths. And I agree with them. But what I'd rather do is spend time just talking about some truths that I know to be true. And one thing that I know for sure, is that everyone is different.
Right.
I mean, everyone is unique. And not only are we unique in this moment in time, but we will change and evolve as we mature, as we go through different seasons in life or chapters in life. And so to think that we can obtain the balance, you're going to be constantly change, because you're changing and your life is changing as you grow older, as you take on more responsibilities. And I don't need to describe that to our listeners. You're smart enough to know what I'm talking about, is that's where I think it gets wonky, because it can get fatigued, because just when you feel like you have achieved some harmony, you make a decision to get married, or you get pregnant, or you become, your partner becomes pregnant. And so, and then all the different scenarios that can happen from there, or you need to move, or you have a parent that needs help. Like, there's so many different things that happen in life that we can't cement ourselves into a particular moment. But what we can do is we can realize when we're in a moment of harmony and relish in it, because it will change and we will need to pivot and adjust accordingly. So I think if you're thinking about everyone is different, and I know I mentioned this earlier, but if you think about like what's right for me right now as a mother of a graduating college student and someone who's now transitioned the day-to-day business that they've ran for the last 18 years is different than you. As much as alignment we are, it's still different with you as a mom with a son who's entering high school. And now you're running a business day to day. So yes, I've been through that chapter, but we are in different chapters. And so to think about my balance relative to yours, as close as we are, it's still very different. And that's just a great example of how different it can be. So what is balanced for you is not balanced for me. So we need to be careful not to look at our peers or people we look up to or people that we trust and say, oh, they have it so good.
Right.
Because they have this and mine's this. No. Adjust your focus on what's right for you and be good with that. And it took me a long time to figure that out because like I've shared on this podcast before, many of my closest college friends decided to, once they worked for, I don't remember, 5 or 6, 10 years, and then they decided to have children and stay at home. It was easy for me to get caught up in am I doing the wrong thing by not doing that? And it's so interesting because I did fight that. I fight that mental, whatever that was. And I fought it. And now it's interesting as we enter our 50s and our children are older, I think they're having a similar thought. Like, wait a minute, should I have stuck with my career or at least some version of that? Because now my kids are gone and I'm dealing with empty nest. And again, the particular friends that I'm talking about are wildly smart and can go do what they choose to do. But I see the mind games that we can almost play with ourselves. So it goes back to comparison.
It does.
This work-life balance breeds comparison. And I want us to not allow ourselves to go there. And we will go there. And I hope you have people around you that can tap you on the shoulder and say, wait a minute, like you do me so often. So yeah, everyone is different, including you. So treat balance and harmony as something very unique to you. Sure. Can you look to others to find inspiration or ideas? Of course. I mean, I hope this podcast helps.
A huge inspiration.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope this podcast is too, but Oprah, yes, can be too. So I think the next truth is that, the myth is you can have it all. The truth is you cannot have it all the time.
That's right.
And so I think you have to really think about what all is. And no, you're probably not going to have it all this week. But I learned over time that I could be a working mom and I could, own this business, and I could be a friend, and I could be all the different roles that I play or that I had. I could do it all, but maybe not every single week was I going to be the best or be able to lean into that role 100%.
Right.
So that's where the grace came in. And, I think that sacrifices are going to be necessary. And so, but if we can think of a sacrifice as something that is okay,
yes,
versus something that's negative,
right,
then I think we're going to feel a lot more of this freedom.
Meaning, a sacrifice.
Yeah.
I'll take 2 minutes to take this phone call.
Right.
On a Saturday because there's a food crisis. Like in our industry, that's the kind of thing we would.
Yeah, I mean, sacrifices could be acute like that. Like that's an acute crisis. But it can also be kind of something easy, like what you and I do a lot of times. We decide to have conversations with your commute in.
Yes.
I mean, you have a 40 whatever minute commute. Well, let's knock some things out. So, but then sometimes
that's just smart.
And then
that's just using time wisely.
That's just us being wise with time. We don't do that every morning because I want you to listen to podcasts and getting smarter like I do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, on Sunday nights, I have been in practice for years. I take 30 minutes. Sometimes it's a little bit longer depending on what the week holds, and I just get organized. And am I sacrificing something? Actually, I'm preparing to win so that maybe I have the chance to be a lot more productive during the week. And then I'm leaving the office for
achieves the balance.
I'm leaving the office at 6 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever it is so that I can go exercise.
That's right.
In the evening.
Achieve the quote unquote balance.
The harmony.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And I will say, to add to that, that's something you've taught me. That's something that we teach here at a minimum with our directors. All of our directors at DMA do that. And we're trying to teach the management team and everybody at the company, I don't care what role you're in, to practice that. Even if it's not Sunday night, fine. It's Friday afternoon or
whatever your
Monday morning, bright and early, like whatever your
and we
jam.
have every version of that
because the point is I know this for sure. I feel yucky when I feel like a failure on a Wednesday because I couldn't do what I set out to do. Well, how did I plan for that? And so you set the stage for yourself. So I appreciate that one a lot.
And what I don't want to dispel is that there's going to be curveballs. I don't care how well planned out you are.
Yes.
But at least if you've planned or at least thought about your week relative to all the roles that you have, and we kind of referenced specifically work in that particular example. Yeah. But what I have found to be helpful, if I think about all the roles that I have, and when I think about the week or the month or whatever time frame I'm focusing on at that moment, then I have found that when the unexpected arrives, then I'm a little bit more prepared.
Totally.
And so
preparedness
is really what it is. And it's not just an act of preparedness or planning or time management, which we'll talk about next. It's an act of also being able to give myself grace and, being a little bit more gentle with myself when things don't go as exactly the way that I planned. And that's what it helps me prepare to do.
That's a good one.
Yep. So time management, and we'll just touch on this. I think it's an outdated concept because time management was born way before, and all the curricula or study around time management really became outdated when we went to 24/7. And so the second coming of digital revolution and social media,
and that's really what you mean. Like you're saying, like compartmentalization of time.
Yeah.
Like during this time in the morning, I'm going to do this. And then every day it's got to be like that. And this is how it has to be all the time. And I never can defer from that.
Scheduling yourself and putting yourself in a position, again, I'm all for time blocking if that's what you need to do. But I'm also, because we live in this 24/7 cycle, we have to realize that, if I'm an early riser and you're a late riser, it's okay for me to send an email at 5:30 in the morning.
And I don't have to answer.
And you don't have to answer. No, you don't.
Or 5:30.
And so I think there's these expectations that, we have to get everything done in this block of time. And the reality is, and I think it's a healthy thing, is that we get to work when hopefully we can be in a space to where we're working, where we're the most productive. Well, that comes with a lot of self-knowledge. And that also comes, and that's something we've worked on as a culture here. And we had to get better at it, because I will tell you, as a leader, 10 years ago, I had a very specific ideal of when people should be working. And now I understand that, yes, as it relates to deadlines with clients or internal deadlines, sure. But as long as the deadline's being met, if you need to get out of the office at 5:30 and go do your thing, and you want to get back on at 8, and because that's when you're in your flow, okay.
And or if that makes you tidy up for tomorrow, like back to that preparedness, it just makes me feel better. I'm saying me, and as in the royal, like everybody, it makes us feel better to do that versus rolling in the morning and like feeling like we're on fire because we didn't tidy things up yesterday.
Right. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the last, truth that I know to be true is that, the early bird doesn't always get the worm. And that's just such an outdated, because again, and still so many leaders today are talking about the importance of getting up early and doing
ones that
5 a.m., some that we love. And I've never been I relate to it because I do like the early rise. But I also respect those of you who don't. My daughter's one, you're one, and I see where your effectiveness comes in. We have some leaders around here that they don't get into their groove until 2 p.m, and I'm like, throwing down a tea because I've been up, and exercise and done all these other things. But, then now I've learned, especially in this stage of my life, I'm kind of a mixture of both. I can go one way or the other. And so I think those are other myths relative to balance. We think, and again, I don't want to go off on this tangent that we got to have a certain amount of sleep. Sleep is very important to us and it's very important to our bodies, but we're all wired differently. What we need in terms of sleep is a little bit different. So, but everything, I can read it 3 times a week. If I don't get 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, I'm not optimum. And, I can't do that without help from help from Dr. Feelgood. And I don't want that for people either. So, I think we just have to be very, again, I think the word is discerning relative to what we're being fed.
Yes.
Relative to this notion of balance and really think about us showing up in a more harmonious way where work, if we choose to work, it's a thriving part of our life. Like that's what I hope for the people who work here. That's what I want them to see. A, their work is rewarding. B, that they're extremely valued. And that this particular company is in support of all of the aspects of their life, but not governing it. That is the goal. So
that we used to call that awakening, enlightenment. We couldn't quite coin it here, but we had listened to Dave Ramsey on Entree Leadership talk about decide. The clap, like he just claps. And he says, people just decide. That is what you're talking about.
Yes.
There is a decision. There's an awareness that clicks one day for people.
It's ownership.
Yeah.
And accountability.
They wake up and they go, oh my gosh. It's like Dorothy with the ruby slippers. And I use that analogy all the time because the point is that she had the power the whole time. And so people wake up and realize that, and then their life changes. And we've seen it here with me. We've seen it with you. We've seen it with our leaders. It is a decision. And once the decision is made and the awareness has clicked in, it's a game changer, an absolute game changer. And so I was thinking about sharing a personal anecdote, but instead of doing that, I think what I should say is, if only this were taught sooner for folks. Like for me, this conversation that we're having right now is imperative for people, not even just men and women, leaving college potentially, like preparing to enter the workforce where they have these notions that they've been taught or that's what they think. And they need a little bit of guidance on how to approach this line of thinking so that they can get there faster than we did.
I know it's happening because they're showing up in interviews, and we interview a lot of young people, and we're in a perpetual state of interviewing. They do show up using the word work-life balance and culture. And you can tell right away that how do you know what those things are? Because we know it's not being accurately talked about in college or high school or whatever they're, however they're entering or wherever they are in their stages in terms of education. We know it's not being taught and in the right way or talked about. I think it's a discussion. And so it's on us.
It is.
As, to help them understand, here's what the reality of those things are. And here's what culture truly is. I know you've been taught to seek it, and maybe you saw it in a movie, or maybe you think it's these certain things, but here's what a culture is. And again, you can go revisit that episode, previous episode where we had 2 full episodes on culture.
Yes, we did.
And we speak to it a lot. And we do talk about the fact that not only do business owners and leaders not know truly what culture was. I certainly didn't until I became a student and really understood what culture is. Work-life balance was one of those things like that I had to figure out. And again, I didn't study that quite as in detail or live through the culture thing. I didn't have to. But I do think it's on us as leaders. And that's why we're having these discussions on this podcast, is to really hopefully help people navigate these notions a little bit more in a healthier way and sooner. By all means, sooner. That's why we're committed to this.
And I said teaching children, and I think people typically, when someone says that, they go to school, like they think about school.
Sure.
Yes. And you inspired me eons ago, years and years ago, to talk about business, talk about these things that we were grappling with at home. So if you're listening to this, that's the start.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, teaching is on you, me, and everyone listening to this podcast. You can't talk about this stuff soon enough to a niece enough. It doesn't even have to be your own child, right? Like young people who are going to work someday and are going to navigate this notion and are going to have some trouble, right? Like they're going to have a struggle with the responsibility that they feel to be a good employee and a good worker because they want to do all those things, maybe more than we do. Like they have this passion for climbing mountains and doing all this cool stuff. And I want to, go out and experience. Well, so do we, they just have to have, we owe it to them to help them be equipped with this line of thinking so that they can use their discernment sooner.
Absolutely. I mean, I do. I hope that, the conversations that we're having here on Self Smarter, certainly helping the leader, in the workplace, the leader that you are in your personal lives and activities. But we're also hopeful that this information is something that you are passing along to the younger people in your life, whoever they may be, so that we are preparing the next generations, plural, with a lot more realistic expectations of what they should expect of themselves and, their future employers and potentially themselves as a business owner.
That's right.
And so that is, again, that's what keeps us on this, committed to this particular sharing these things. So yeah, you're right. This should be something that we're all committed to.
That's right. So for your, if you have dinner out tonight, or if you have a car ride with a young person, or if you do just kind of a check-in with somebody that that's young, I would say, how do we feel about work-life balance? Well, let me tell you what Miss Danelle said. Miss Danelle says work-life balance is bullshit.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I want you. You don't need to be dropping the bullshit with the young ones, but I'm sure they know that word quite well.
Yes.
I know.
Unfortunately, yes. All right. With that, let's transition to our music moment. And, usually these are happy times. And recently you and I lost one of our favorite country music performers, Naomi Judd.
Yeah. This is certainly not what we had planned to talk about, but it's worth recognizing because, especially given our age and given our love for country music, the Judds, and then ultimately Winona, even in her solo career, I mean, they were a huge influence if you think about country radio at the time and how unique they were, this mother-daughter duo. I mean, they're obviously, if you just listen to the episode on Dolly, we had women that were in country music that were influentials in the 80s and the 90s, but they were so unique and their story was so amazing. And then it started to come out over time, and I mean, their songs were speaking to us. I mean, the whole long list of them. And then as you watch their rise to fame, and you watch them, quite frankly, be very real. And they stood out to me as being incredibly talented and just on this kind of very unpaved path, if you think about their journey and how they scrapped it together. And you think about Naomi with these 2 kids in tow and what she did to get the opportunity to pursue this music path, this career, this incredible career. And, they were so relevant. I think they were relevant, on the radio charts from 83 to 91.
Right.
That's a long time.
Right
and
in the heart of our adolescence.
Adolescence, yeah. And so the Judds, their songs are a big part of the fabric of, our lives, quite frankly. Absolutely. I mean, and I could name song after song, and so could you. And so I wanted to talk about it because, and I know we have special moments around the songs, but I in particular had the incredible opportunity to meet them both. And so in 2000, they did because they basically, they tabled their duet career in 91. And I remember this vividly in college. And then Winona came out with her solo career. And they did that because Naomi was dealing with health issues. And so they took about a 9-year break. Well, in 2000, they came out with, I don't know, the reunion tour. I forget the exact name of the tour. And my good friend got us tickets, and we were able to go backstage and meet them both. And it was amazing. And they were just the most down-to-earth people. And they could tell I was 6 months pregnant. And so I had the music program with me, and I flipped it to a particular page, and they were going to sign it. And Naomi says to me, you're so beautiful. And she was looking at my stomach. I was visibly pregnant. And I said, thank you. And Winona said, do you know what you're having? I said, yes, I'm having a little girl. And she says, have you named her yet? And I said, yeah, her name is Mackie, which is my maiden name. So they both signed this program. It was a large program. They both signed it, and one of them wrote, Mackie, something about you're going to do amazing things in this world. And so I had it framed and there's this beautiful picture, which I'll make sure that the team has so that when we're promoting this particular episode, but it's me standing there with both of them. And I just remember in that moment, them making me feel so special. Like I was there to meet them, but it ended up being about me and because they're both mothers, they couldn't help themselves. And I got to see just this real genuineness of the people that they were. And then to think about, they went on to do several other comeback tours or reunion tours. I forget what they call them, but I just applauded Naomi through the years to really speaking out against her struggles, her struggles with mental illness and depression, and, how that impacts them. And to see her daughters now, reconciling that reality. And, by now, the news is we all know how she lost her battle with it. And and I think it's up to us to honor and tribute not only her incredible talent, but the incredible brave woman that she was to speak about something that, and again, I encourage you to go listen to some of her interviews. She's been talking about this for years and years and pleading for more awareness and help around depression in particularly. And we have a lot of work to do, and we continue to lose these notable people, but think about the people that we're losing that don't have the stage that Naomi has. And so I think, again, it's a little bit of a somber music moment, but I think it's one worth noting because, yes, they had will continue to have such an impact on the two of us, and I know many, many others. And I mean, I can't count the amount of people that sent me an article, this article, and traded it. So I know it's resonating with a lot of people, and one of them being my daughter. And, I know that as she was growing up, that was always one of her favorite pictures was of me with Winona and Naomi. But I just hope that we all take the time to really think about those particular struggles as it relates to either people in our lives or not, and what we can do to hopefully, again, do something about this particular illness that is impacting, or disease that, it's a combination, I'm sure, of both, that are impacting us. But I do hope that we'll all listen to some Judd's music a lot over the next couple of months so that they can, experience a lift. I know radio's really, in CMT, there's a lot of folks doing things. There's a lot of beautiful tributes being made to Naomi and Winona and their music. And the more we listen to that, hopefully the more meaningful that'll be for their family. But we'll certainly keep that family in our thoughts and prayers. And thank you for letting me talk about it, because they definitely have a special mark on for me, and I know for you as well.
And for your daughter.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that. We'll bring our episode to a close today, but before we do, we just wanted to mention we will have some links in the show notes.
Yes, absolutely.
So be sure to take a look at that. Feel free to visit our website for other awesome episodes. This is episode 15, so there's 14 additional episodes for you to listen to. And we'd love for you to give us some reviews. It helps. Not only it tells us what we're doing well or not doing well, it also helps other people find us. And we do believe that, you know, even the story about Naomi is just making me think about how important it is for us to be together, people to be together, to be able to talk about these things that nobody wants to talk about. And that's what we're doing here.
Absolutely.
Self Smarter podcast. So with that, rest in peace, Naomi Judd. And we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.